Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to get us started right on time because we have an action-packed day today. So welcome to Climate First Bank's latest Fireside Chat. Today we're joined by Anna Rathmann from the Jane Goodall Institute, Climate First Bank's founder, CEO, and chairman Ken LaRoe, and of course the incredible Dr. Jane Goodall. I'd like to start by introducing Ken. Prior to Climate First Bank, Ken successfully founded and operated two other community banks, Florida Choice Bank and First Green Bank. First Green Bank was the nation's first bank with an environmentally stated mission. It was the heartbreak of selling First Green Bank and the desire to leave the world a better place for his grandchildren that inspired him to start Climate First. While reading the book Drawdown, he envisioned a bank that's core mission was to reduce atmospheric CO2. We opened Climate First Bank in June of 2021 as the only benefit corporation bank in the state of Florida, and we've been operationally net zero since day one. Ken is a Florida State and probably more proudly a University of Florida graduate, a lifelong resident of Eustis, Florida, and a proud husband, father, and grandfather. Congrats on the latest grandchild, Ken. Thank you for joining us, and would you please introduce us all to Anna?
Absolutely. Yes, I was blessed with my fourth grandchild about 2 days ago, and I'm in Nashville to help my daughter and her family since she has no family here. It is a great pleasure to introduce Anna Rathmann. Anna is the executive director of the Jane Goodall Institute. Her experience has been very broad at the intersection of science, conservation, education, and storytelling. Anna holds an MBA from Georgetown and an undergraduate degree from Valparaiso University. She currently serves on 3 nonprofit boards that has interests in historic preservation, importance of maintaining open space, combating wildlife crime, and the role of wildlife and well-being, happiness, and the interconnection with humans, animals, and the planet. Prior to joining Jane Goodall Institute, Anna served as the inaugural director of the Great Plains Conservation Foundation, where she implemented sustainable conservation initiatives in Kenya, Zimbabwe, and Botswana. Anna's sitting in her office in DC, and that backdrop is the actual wall, not one of those screen things that we all have. So with that, Anna, if we could pivot to you, and you could tell us a little bit about the Jane Goodall Institute.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Ken. Thank you to Climate First Bank for this opportunity to be here with you today and to hear a little bit more from Jane and for her to share some of her inspiration and message. And as you said, I have the great privilege and honor of being the executive director of the Jane Goodall Institute. I'm based in Washington, D.C. And at this extraordinary organization, which is close to 50 years old, we are really seeking to fuel hope through action. That's something that Jane, the importance of hope, the power of hope that Jane talks a lot about. We do that through 3 major ways. One is operating one of the longest running wild animal research sites in the world. That's in Western Tanzania. It's where Jane did her seminal research, really changing the way that we humans view our relationship to other animals and our environment. We do that through large landscape-wide conservation initiatives and a framework that we call TACARE, or it's an acronym for Take Care, that really involves listening and humbling yourself to the needs of others and listening and dialogue and supporting one another in the decision-making process. So we do large landscape-wide conservation initiatives following that model and have many wonderful partners doing that. And then finally, really encouraging people, and we say children of all ages, to take agency in their own lives and inspiring individuals to take action to make positive impacts in their communities with other people, with other animals and the planet. And we do that through a program called Roots and Shoots. And Tampa, which is, I know, a community near and dear to many in the Climate First Bank community, is a place where we are actually making some investments in Roots and Shoots. We're setting up a base camp there, so we'll have an opportunity to get more engaged in the Tampa community, engage more young people of all ages in making these positive impacts. So please stay tuned as we hear, or as you hear more from us about Roots and Shoots in that community. And we often use a phrase, Jane said this came at the first meeting of Roots and Shoots. It's the together we can, together we will. And Jane has now used a together we must at the end. That's really a rallying cry for us at the Jane Goodall Institute. And it's something that we seek to embody in all of our programs, embodying Jane's core aspects of innovation, of curiosity, of boldly, hopefully going forward into the future. So thank you again to Climate First. I know there's a lot of alignment around many of those subjects, and so grateful to be a part of this conversation today.
Anna, so I don't forget, and I don't want to get to the end and then have forgotten, what can
Yeah.
we do as the audience to help the Jane Goodall Institute? Is there a simple, go to the website, we can make a contribution, we can contribute time or whatever? And I'm thinking of the Roots and Shoots program, and you told me, I think the other day, that the traction in Tampa has been incredible, which is very heartwarming for me. But I'm thinking of Nashville, where
Yep.
my grandkids are also, of any way to help. So.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for that. And you're 100% right. If you feel so compelled, making a gift to support our work is always appreciated. We are entirely donor funded. All of Jane's work is funded through charitable contributions and partnerships. So that's absolutely a way to get involved, and ways to get involved in a very tangible, physical way. Roots and Shoots is a great opportunity. And you can do that through matching up with a group that's an established group of Roots and Shoots. You can do it developing your own program. Some of the programs that I find the most fun are ones where young people, very young people, especially children and preschoolers, come up with the ideas themselves. And that's something that can be guided by an adult. And just hearing from them what it is about their environments that what problem they're looking to solve, the way in which they want to solve it. So it's something that can be done independently or as part of a group. Tampa will have a special focus because it will have this designation of base camp, but Roots and Shoots, one of the beauties of it is that it can be done anywhere. And truly it is. It's a global program.
Cool, thank you. Lauren, do we roll the interview now? Is that the next thing on the agenda?
Yes. Rachel's queuing up the interview right now. As a reminder, please, input your questions and answers through the Q&A function. We will be spending some additional time with Anna to address those towards the end. We might go a little over today, so please include your questions in the Q&A function so that we can make sure to get to them either during today's conversation or in a follow-up message. So I'll let Rachel transition us now. Great.
So, Dr. Goodall, I have to start with a funny story from our wonderful dinner last night. Cindy and I sat down, and I looked at the table and said, "Oh, what a cool touch. There's a little shot glass with a wee dram of whiskey for everyone, and we're going to do a toast." And so I was just in conversation talking to some of the dinner guests, and my wife, Dr. Cindy LaRoe, burst out laughing, looking towards my direction, and the fellow sitting next to me had taken one of those little glasses and tipped it up, and then the look on his face when he realized it was olive oil was just absolutely priceless. He spit olive oil out all over the place, and he's gagging and joking. So that was a little comedic relief. And then I was thinking about actually meeting you and talking with you, and I thought, I bet she gets so tired of everybody saying, "It's an honor to speak with you. It's a dream come true. It's a bucket list filled." you're my all-time hero. So those are the words I came up with that I was going to say. Cindy and I saw you speak with Alec Baldwin out in San Francisco a number of years ago in an event that Tom Steyer and his organization put on. And I was thinking it'd be the best thing ever if I could ever speak with you. So I'm not sure where to start with an introduction. I think every human on the planet knows who Dr. Goodall is. Her famous story began in childhood with the reading of Dr. Dolittle and her very supportive mother. And I believe, Dr. Goodall, that led to your commitment to go to Africa someday and study animals and write about them. And she ultimately did that in her 20s. Her research led to the discovery of tool use by chimpanzees, which completely upended the current scientific beliefs. And she went on to earn her PhD at the University of Cambridge. So I was thinking about what our conversation would be about, Dr. Goodall, and I read your latest book, The Book of Hope, and it's like, okay, well, that's obviously, what we need to talk about. And Cindy was looking at your name and she said, oh my gosh, if you reverse the syllables of Dr. Goodall's last name, it's all good. And so I think you have one of those last names that predestines your future and the future of the planet. So all good, hope, it's all synonymous. So I was thinking, surely I shouldn't bring up my really negative headspace that I'm in with all the horrid stuff that's going on in the world right now, especially in our country, especially in Florida. You've probably heard about some of the just absolutely insidious bills that have been passed, and the anti-ESG bill that's going to get crammed down within a month probably. And I just think I'm just such a wimp. I'm reading it at 89. You really don't like to travel. You really don't like the back-to-back stuff. But when asked, why do you, I feel like a wimp? I'm 65 years old and I have trouble getting rid of the pooch lip. So why do you keep going like you do?
Well, I keep going simply because I have to. I've got so little time left, probably. I don't know how long I'll live. And there's so much misery and helplessness and hopelessness on the planet. And if everybody loses hope, as so many are, then they fall into apathy and do nothing. So many people have said to me, I feel hopeless. What can I do? I'm just one person. And we keep hearing, think global, act local, but it's the wrong way around. Because if you think globally, you have to be depressed. There's no way you can think about what's going on in the world today and not feel incredibly depressed. So I tell people, don't think about that. You can't solve all those problems. Nobody, one person, can solve all those problems. No one group can solve all those problems. But think where you are. Is there something that bothers you? Maybe there's litter, maybe there's a polluted stream, maybe there's a lot of homelessness, maybe stray dogs are being treated badly. Something you care about. Get together a group of people and try and do something about it. And you will find you do make a difference locally, and then you'll feel good about that. So you'll want to do more, and that will inspire others. And then you can think, yes, I do know all around the world there are people just like us, and they're all doing their little bit. And so then you dare to begin to think globally that, we know the solutions to the problems we've made, environmentally that is, but we seem to lack the will to do it, and we seem to have lost wisdom. But you made me smile when you talked about my name going back the front, because a little boy of 7 a little Burundian boy, and you know those little African children, then when they're dressed in little tiny suits to go to some event, the father was a politician. And with those big children, African eyes, he looked up at me and he said, "Your name says it all." That little boy.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I know.
That's amazing.
So I go on doing it because I care about children. I care passionately about the environment, the forests, the oceans. I care passionately about animals. And because I seem to have been given a gift, two gifts actually, many, but two in particular. One is a good constitution, because I can go on doing it, even though I'll be 90 next year. And two, it's a gift of communication. So I was born with a love of writing. I always thought I could communicate that way. I was terrified of public speaking. And it wasn't until I had to do it the first time that I realized I had that gift too. And if you're given gifts like that, then you have to use them.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Especially the not realizing until you were forced to do it about, the public speaking piece of it. I kind of had a similar experience. My parents enrolled me in 4-H when I was a child, and one of their modules is public speaking. So that was the first time I was ever exposed to it. And I was also terrified until I started doing it, of course. But I'm often asked, well, why are you concerned about the environment or climate or whatever? And now it's crystal clear to me at 65 and with 3 grandkids and another one on the way. But early on, I grew up in a rural Central Florida county that was very backwards politically and very, very racist. But I hunted and fished all the time, like every day. And I just realized that being out in the woods was just what gave me energy and such. But now, like I said, at 65, I didn't really know what it meant to be an environmentalist or conservationist or whatever they called us back then. Naturalist, like you've pointed out a number of times. But it just scares me to death to think of my little ones and the world that we've left them. So you have talked about, people frequently say, well, the young people are going to save us. The young people care. The young people are going to save us. And I agree with you that that's one, an impossible burden, and two, we should never have placed that burden on them in the first place. But what can we do as my generation and your generation, other than, we got to do more. Am I making any sense? It's just, it troubles me so deeply that I just dread the day one of my grandkids says, "Grandpa, what was your generation thinking?"
No, that is very haunting, isn't it? Actually, they're saying it already. And all we can do, what can we do? I think different people have different opportunities. Different people have different ways that they can make a difference, because people have different gifts, they have different experiences. And so it really does depend on who they are and what their circumstances are. I mean, if you think about it, CEO of a big company with one flourish of his pen can make a huge difference, either in the right direction or the wrong direction. Then take a homeless person out on the streets. There's one opposite me now. And what can they do? Well, even they can do something. I've talked to some of them, and they say, well, we really don't like all this trash around us. We don't like, all these other homeless people, they just throw their trash around. So we collect it up and it makes us feel better. So, it just does depend on who you are, what you can do. But if everybody does what they can do to make the world better, then it's bound to move in the right direction. On the other hand, if you say, what can we do about these politicians who refuse to admit the truth? Climate change deniers, most of them, I think they don't really believe what they're saying. But the politicians take that attitude because they don't want to change, therefore deny it and carry on as usual.
I agree. It's just political posturing or marketing at the end of the day, which is really, really horrid to think about. It's very narcissistic.
It's also very damaging, isn't it? It's very damaging because a lot of the people who listen to them, they haven't been terribly well educated. And so they believe what they're told, but somebody is in power and says there's no such thing as climate change, or they're more often beginning to say, well, yes, we agree that climate's changing, but it's nothing to do with us. It's just a cycle of evolution.
Yeah, and all we can do, if they even get that far, is to say, well, we have to adapt. And to me, that's a little bit of a defeatist attitude in its own right. I just assume I'm not even going to go there. It's like my rant about more roads. I'm a big fan of absolute traffic constipation, where it just can't flow, and then development patterns will be where they need to be, and they'll make walkable communities and all that. But that's another story for another time. But reading about your research and emphasizing the importance of empathy and compassion in our relationship with animals and the environment, and you were obviously way, way ahead of your time. And I think now science is finally catching up to your observations and hypothesis from decades ago, that animals and even maybe plants are sentient beings. And I've been studying a lot on the microbiome in the soil and how important soil is, and then the actual communication. And I don't know if you saw this study recently. A fellow was a radio enthusiast, and he was also a scientist, or is also a scientist, and he developed probes to go in the soil to measure electrochemical reactions, and he ascertained that plants have words, and it's up to 50 distinct signals they send to each other, and they in fact have even strung together sentences. And it just boggles my mind, and it just makes me think of the scream a tree would utter when somebody goes to cut it down. And how can, this is probably the dumbest rhetorical question I could ask, but how can we foster more empathy in our society? And why is it so important? I mean, I've got ideas. The first thing is to throw these things away and anything that is connected to them. But what advice would you give?
What a difficult question, because somebody was talking the other day about do plants feel pain? And if we say that we should move to a plant-based diet because animals feel pain and are sentient, and we then discover that plants possibly are similar, I hope that's not really true, because, well, then everybody will become extinct. Maybe that's the plan, because animals shouldn't eat animals, animals shouldn't eat plants, we shouldn't eat animals or plants. So, there'll be minerals left. It'll be like Mars or the moon. So, I don't know, I think we just have to somehow realize that it's not black and white, and we can't live totally in empathy with everything if everything is sentient, because then we shouldn't harm it and we couldn't live. So I don't know, how would you answer that question? Because it's an interesting one. And it's come up in my mind many, many times. The more I learn about free communication and plants curling their leaves up when somebody passes by that they have previously destroyed other plants. That was an experiment I read with tomatoes, or tomatoes as you would call them. And when
Oh my gosh.
along cutting down tomatoes and then walked past the others, they all curled up their leaves.
Holy smokes. That's pretty telling. And to answer your question about what do I think, I'm not quite sure. And I think it might have been Bill McKibben that just recently said, your vegetables aren't vegan. And it's a result of what's going on with all the nematodes and the whatever in the soil. And so I guess you're right. If you think of, if everything is sentient, which maybe it's not, maybe it is just plants and animals. Well, I don't know. Gosh, does that drag in protozoa, or I don't know.
It's something, we just have to be a little bit, I don't know what the word is, but if we're going to live and if we're going to try and make a difference, we have to eat something. And we can't eat minerals. And then maybe we find minerals are sentient too. So we've just got to sort of draw a line somewhere and say, okay, I'm going to be on this planet. I'm going to try and make a difference. I have to eat something. I'm not going to eat beings that I know are sentient and feel pain and have emotions. Plants, well, they have all these strange communications, but that doesn't necessarily make them sentient, doesn't necessarily make them feel pain, at least not the way we do. And right through evolution, we've seen really a pretty tough world out there.
It is very tough. And maybe that brings me to the next topic is we've seen so much evil in society and so many bad actors. And it's like, I don't know, I felt like 10 years ago, somebody threw a switch and said, we're going to start producing a whole bunch of sociopaths and they're going to gain power around the world. And I was thinking about it. I'm wondering, in your research with the chimpanzees and the community and the culture, was there sociopathy? Could you ascertain evil beyond evil in that species to where anything could be correlated to our human experience? And what I'm hoping you're going to say is I don't know what I'm hoping, either yes or no, but if it's a yes, you did see it, is there any hope that it's a cycle that we'll pass through? So I know that was a whole bunch of.
Well, to answer the question you asked, chimpanzees, I was horrified to find they have a dark and brutal side, that they are capable of extreme violence, that they are capable of a kind of primitive warfare based on territorial claims, and that they can kill in these wars. They kill members of a neighboring community, strangers in other words. And in territorial, the males patrol the territory, and if they see a stranger, usually a female, they will attack and usually leave that victim to die because the wounds are inflicted and they're horrible. But then you talk about evil. And I, a long time ago, thought about this and decided evil and violence are two different things. And a chimpanzee will react to a sudden stimulus, like I see a stranger and boom, I'm going to attack. Or here are some creatures coming and I'm going to kill them because I'm hungry, that sort of thing. Whereas To me, a definition of evil would be somebody who can sit in a comfortable chair and plan torture for people far away to be done by others and not them. That planning, that cold-blooded planning of inflicting pain on others. That's, to me, the difference between our aggression and chimpanzee aggression. And because our intellect has evolved to be able to discuss these things and talk about them and plan for the future, then theoretically, we should be able to control our aggressive impulses. And you know something, mostly we do. I mean, our words, we say, oh, I could kill him, but we don't really mean it. But maybe underlying that there is an aggressive impulse, but we've learned to suppress it. And most people don't go around behaving the way they often feel. They do learn to control it. So it's these planned wars, the planned horror, the creation of all these weapons of mass destruction. That's evil, I think.
Okay, so what I think I'm hearing is because of our superior intellect, it does distinguish us, and we are capable of evil, whereas other great apes aren't. But because of our intellect, we should be able to control it.
And interesting on this topic, some chimpanzees are much more aggressive. Some chimpanzees are really nasty. They're really nasty individuals. They have a little soft side somewhere, like I suppose most evil humans have. I mean, I know Putin loves dogs, tigers, something. I can't remember, tigers, I think. So everybody has a little soft side somewhere, like a chimpanzee who will be brutal to females, will be all sweet and loving to infants.
Mm.
There is that movement towards, because they're all individuals, movements towards a person who stands out as being evil, even in the chimps.
Interesting. We're running close, and I wanted to touch on one other thing, in that, to make sure I touched on one other thing, if nothing else. And I had, after my experience with First Green Bank, my last bank that was a real learning experience and learning journey for me and all of my folks, I kind of started thinking, well, I'm a single issue guy, and that's the E in ESG. You know, if there's not a planet, if there's not a habitable climate, nothing else matters. And then I've started to realize, no, wait a minute, everything's interconnected, just like nature, just like everything. But when I read your book, it was like, I read it and I thought, what on earth, why haven't I thought of this till now? But it was the connection between poverty and environmental destruction. And that was a huge light bulb. And it's making me really rejigger what we emphasize as a company and as people to get the result of trying to reverse the climate crisis. Could you speak a little to that and a little to our audience as to, how you realize that and what you did?
Yes. When I learned back in 1986 that chimp numbers were disappearing and forests were being cut down, I thought, well, I've got to try and do something. I didn't know what. And I went to visit by then, there were 6 different field study sites, people studying chimps. And I went to learn more about what was happening. Why were the chimp numbers decreasing? I learned a lot about that, like the bushmeat trade, the killing of mothers to steal their babies to sell for entertainment as pets and so on. But I also learned a lot about the suffering of so many of the Africans living in and around chimp habitat. The crippling poverty, the lack of health and education facilities, the degradation of the land, the growth in human population numbers and the growth of the number of livestock. And then I flew over the tiny Gombe National Park, where we're still doing research on those same chimp families after 63 years. And I was shocked. I mean, I knew there was some deforestation, but I wasn't prepared to look down and see Gombe as a little island of forest surrounded for miles by bare hills that used to be covered with forest. And there were more people living there than the land could support, too poor to buy food from elsewhere, the land over-farmed and infertile. And it hit me, that's when it hit me. If we don't help these people find ways of living without destroying their environment, we can't save anything. And they were cutting down the trees to make more land to grow more food, or to make money from charcoal or timber. And this was happening all over Africa. And so that began our Jane Goodall Institute program, Take Care, or Takari as it's known, which is our method of community-led conservation, and the importance of working with and listening to the local communities, involving them, helping them to understand that protecting the environment isn't just for wildlife. Everywhere, it's just for our own future. And we're part of that natural world, and we depend on it, and we depend on healthy ecosystems. But so if you're living out in wild areas, you're destroying the environment in order to live. But there's poverty in the cities. And that poverty is because people, to survive, buy the cheapest food and clothing. They can't afford to ask, as we can, did it harm the environment when it was produced? Has it come from far away when we could have bought it or produced it locally? Is it cruel? Was it cruel to animals, like the awful factory farms, which are so destroying the environment? Is it cheap because of unfair wages? And that's in so-called civilized countries, not only in the global south. And so in that way, we must alleviate poverty. And also, another thing which comes into it, this ignorance. And we find this ignorance, we find people who don't really understand the problems that we face. Why? Because whole sections of society in this country, in the UK, have maybe deliberately been kept under-educated. And they haven't had the proper resources for the children, to learn what the real truth is. That's why I like coming to the red states, because I want the children to really understand the truth, and not the lies that you hear on some news channels when you talk to some people.
Wow, that is really powerful, and you really brought it home with the analogy of the city, a city poor person. I mean, they don't have to go cut the last tree down just to have charcoal or catch the last fish, but you're right, they're definitely directly and indirectly influencing it. And then a perfect example of bringing it home is Appalachia in America and the coal mines. And you shut down a coal mine, you shut down a community, and that just fuels resentment and anger and political unrest. Unbelievable, really. We are about out of time, and I'd like to pivot back to my coworker Lauren to ask some questions from listeners if we have just a few more minutes. Lauren, are you there?
I am. Can you
Hi.
guys? Hey. Yeah, I have some really, really great questions. And I think a really great one to start with is, talking about, your work as a woman and a woman in science. So did you encounter any challenges early in your career? And how did you overcome them to become such a respected figure in your field?
Well, when I was young and just starting out, studying chimpanzees, the world was very different, very, very different. And there's no question but that in many countries, probably the majority around the world, the role of women in society has improved, definitely. We're not quite there yet, but getting better all the time. So when I first began talking about tool using, I hadn't been to college at the time. And so people said, well, why should we believe her? She's just a girl and she hasn't even been to college. And somebody even said, oh, she must have taught the chimpanzees to use tools since they were running away from me. That would have been brilliant if I could have taught them to use tools. But then, you know, when the Geographic picked it up and people, the scientists started saying, well, she's only got this, you know, fame because she's got good legs and the Geographic could put her on the cover. And so, whereas today you would utter a lawsuit against somebody saying that, I just thought, well, if my legs have given me money to do what I desperately want to do, which is find out about chimps, thank you, legs.
There's another, I think, question that really ties in that, and also you just mentioned wanting to go to red states to educate people and kids in those areas that might be getting information that, you know, isn't necessarily truthful or aligned with protecting our planet and the people that inhabit it. Is there any specifics that you can share on how you empower, you know, young women or children to achieve their dreams in states like Florida, where the political landscape tends to silence those voices instead of lifting them up?
Well, first of all, you know, what my mother told me when I wanted to study animals in the wild and write books about them, no thought of being a scientist back then. And she said, well, if you really want to do something like this, then you'll have to work hard, take advantage of every opportunity, any opportunity. And then if you don't give up, hopefully you find a way. So that's one thing that I start off with. And, you know, the message of our youth program, Roots and Shoots, is that every single individual makes an impact every single day. And most of us can choose what sort of impact we make. Even poor people can choose if they have the knowledge. And that's the point. So going into the red states, what do I want to do? Try and start our Roots and Shoots program. And that's why we chose Tampa as one of the places where we want to have what we call a base camp. And it's a base camp for young people. And in Roots and Shoots, the young people choose projects to make the world better, one to help people, one to help animals, one to help the environment. They choose it. We don't, it's bottom up, not top down, because we start with kindergarten and end with university. No, we don't end with university. We're getting adults joining now, but basically it's for youth. And so, of course, the younger ones have to have some guidance, but even very small children just know if they want to help people, animals, or the environment. I've seen it going around the world. And this program is now in 68 countries and growing fast. And because they interact with each other around the world, they're getting to understand different cultures. And they're sort of they're being educated in that way.
That's, Lauren, real quick on that, the red state thing, and Dr. Goodall, that was kind of a little bit of our philosophy is influence and educate and go where that's needed the most. And I was complaining to Lauren and my mutual friend, Kat Taylor, a couple of years ago about the environment in Florida, the environment, no pun intended, in Florida. And she said, well, Ken, thank God you're there. You're a missionary in the jungle. And it often feels that way, but you know, maybe we can, you know, turn the giant ship, maybe.
Well, we have to, don't we?
Well, yes.
Have to.
And dragging some people kicking and screaming, I guess. But it is kind of fascinating. My dad is 85, Dr. Goodall, and
Just call me Jane.
Well, Jane, my dad is 85. He's a very conservative, politically conservative guy, a lifetime NRA member, and all that kind of stuff. But as he gets older, and I think it's maybe the great-grandkids, he's completely distraught about what we're doing to the planet. He's completely concerned about the climate crisis. He's completely accepting of all gender issues, and it's like, well, he's turned into the most understanding, delightful old guy, and he probably hate to admit it, but he's very, very progressive, even as a conservative Republican, and he certainly wouldn't tell his friends that. I don't know where I'm going with all that, but maybe to say that people can be influenced even very late in life.
They can, and they're influenced very often by their children and grandchildren. No question. I've met so many who've been changed that way. And it's also interesting, when I first came to the US in the 60s, there wasn't this divisive atmosphere. And I met many Republicans that I worked with and who helped in environmental issues. And there wasn't this strict adherence to whichever side you're on. The same in Britain, exactly the same.
Well, I think the real problem we have now, though, is, like in the old days when you'd leave the office to go to an appointment, you'd turn the radio on, FM radio, and you'd relax, and you could clear your head, and you weren't being fed venom. And now it's 24/7. You're being attacked from all sides, and it's so easy to radicalize people now. That's never. I suddenly came to the conclusion a while back that people say history repeats itself. It absolutely does not repeat itself. The only thing that repeats itself is human behavior.
Yeah.
We never had these 15 years ago, but we do now, and it's altered everything.
I don't use one. I won't.
I wish I could not. I mean, I say that sounds like I don't have agency, but it is very difficult. Lauren, do we have any more time or any more questions? I'm trying to keep track and I kind of lost track.
I think we have a few more minutes, but one question from me is if you would please share your most impactful memory while you were out in the field. Is there something that really just stuck with you in a way that's, gotten you through challenges or found joy in that memory as you've grown in this field?
Well, I think probably one of the most meaningful interactions I had was right at the beginning. The first chimpanzee to begin to lose his fear of me was a very calm, very handsome male. He had a white hair on his chin. I called him David Greybeard. And on this one occasion, it was about a year after he began to lose his fear, and he was actually allowing me to follow him. Whereas before, when he went away, I let him go because I didn't want him to feel I was pushing him. But now he was quite calm. I could follow him. I was following him, and he went through a thorny thicket, which was easy for him. But, we wear these silly clothes, and I was getting caught up in all kinds of thorns. And so I thought, I've lost him, but never mind, I'll find him tomorrow, perhaps. And I got through the tangle, and there he was sitting. And he was looking back, and it looked as though he was waiting for me. I don't know, maybe he was. Anyway, I sat near him, and on the ground between us was a ripe red palm oil nut, and chimps love them. So I picked it up, and I held it out towards him on my hand, and he turned his face away. So I pushed my hand closer, and he looked directly into my eyes. He reached out, he took that nut, he dropped it with one movement, and then very gently squeezed my fingers, which is how chimps reassure each other. So in that moment, we understood each other perfectly. I realized that he didn't want the nut for some reason, but that he understood that my motive was good, and he understood that my motive was good. So we were communicating with the gestural, non-verbal gestural communication that we both share. It's the same in chimps and humans: kissing, embracing, holding hands, patting one another, all these things we share. And so that was a very, very meaningful moment because we were totally connected.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. The another one was the photo of you embracing the female that had been
Wunda,
wounded.
that was beyond. It was the most amazing thing. I never met that chimp till that day, and she was being released onto this beautiful island, and she came out of her carrying cage, and you know, I'd seen her on the boat getting to the island, but I'd never met her before. She was about 9 years old at the time, and she gave me this long, unusually long embrace, and it was really perhaps the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me.
Did she know that you were responsible for her? I mean, having never met you, but yet she did. What do you think was going on?
So I don't know. One of the caregivers who knew her well said just what you said. How does she know this lady was responsible for everything? Well, of course she didn't. She couldn't. There was no possible way. So it's just that I do have a connection sometimes with an animal, sometimes with dogs, occasionally with horses, and sometimes with chimps. Doesn't always happen, but there is a connection.
That's really amazing.
Wow, what an impactful story. Well, we are pretty much at time, so I would like to ask if both of you could perhaps share an action item or something for the audience to take away as to what they can do in their own lives to either protect chimps, solve climate change. If you have any lasting advice for the audience, we would love to hear it.
I'll kick off if that's okay, Lawrence. This is maybe I don't know, anecdotal or something, or indicative of a much more macro solution. But I really like Yvonne Chenard's comment that he makes all the time, or edict, and that's take a kid fishing. And all my girls, my daughter and my granddaughters love to fish. None of the boys do, but all the girls do. And just having them out there in nature, fishing, understanding the importance of everything, and it's just a great teaching moment. And I don't know, that's what got me started. So I feel very powerful about that.
Well, so I would have to completely disagree with you on that, because having realized that fish can even recognize human faces and that they certainly feel pain, I've always hated fishing. But, you know, okay, people fish, people hunt. For me, my advice would not be to take people fishing, but it would be, first of all, to just remember that every day you live, you make some kind of difference, and to try and think ethically, what sort of difference do you make? And you can do things like moving towards a plant-based diet, because even if plants are sentient, they have to be slightly different, and we have to eat something. You can think about what you buy. You can plant a tree, because trees absorb CO2. You can help a dog. You can make somebody smile, but just every day try and think, I'm going to try and make the world a better place. Something like that everybody can do, because not everybody has the privilege of being able to take their children fishing, whether it's ethical or not.
Right. Yeah, I agree on the fishing thing too. From that perspective, and that at the aquarium last night, it was to me, it was really sad looking at those fish in captivity and noticing, because I've been a lifelong fisherman, I've caught most of those fish, and in the wild, they're beautiful, they're vibrant, they're almost, you know, fluorescent, they're so bright, and they're all washed out in that aquarium, and just the mindless circling. I'm just thinking, boy, that feels so cruel. And I often had that internal conflict catching fish too. So I'm a catch and release guy. I know I believe also that they feel pain.
Well, I hope you don't use a barbed hook.
Yeah, I bend them all back. I do. And I teach my kids, bend the barb back so it doesn't damage them if you.
We shouldn't end this conversation on being cruel to fish.
You're right. You're totally right. Plant-based diet.
Got that big blue fish behind you, and he's kind of saying, what on earth is going on here?
He definitely is saying that.
This is meant to be about the climate, not me and my friends. Where do we come to this?
Right. Yeah, Cindy did that. My wife did that painting.
Beautiful painting.
Yes, thank you. She'll like to hear that.
I'm not advising people to go fishing, but I do advise people, if they possibly can, to be out in nature, because that's proven now to be beneficial physically to our physical and mental health. And in fact, in Canada and Japan, doctors can actually prescribe, they can write out a prescription to spend so long in nature every day or every week. And it really is amazing to be able to do that.
Oh my gosh. I just thought of a solution to the take a kid fishing, take a kid foraging.
Yeah, that's right.
Because that's something that I've always been interested in, but never done and wanted to learn. What a better excuse to learn it than to take my grandkids out and say, oh, look, we can eat these mushrooms. We can eat this. Let's go home and make a meal. That's it. I'm doing that.
Okay, so we'll agree. Being out in nature is very, very important because we're part of the natural world. And if young people get a chance to be in nature, they'll learn to love it. If they love it, they want to protect it. And so we'll have generations of young people growing up wanting to protect the natural world.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Goodall, thank you so much. I can't convey.
It was going to be Jane, not Dr. Goodall. You forgot time.
I know, I still say yes, sir, to my dad. So it's one of those things I can't help. But this was delightful, and I know it's going to change some lives. And I'm so excited that you were willing to talk to us.
I've had a great time talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for staying a little bit later today, because we do have Anna here to answer live questions, and we have quite a few in the chat. So I will get those going. Ken, FYI, your camera is off. There you are. I hope everyone enjoyed that. I could listen to Jane talk all day. She's such an inspiration. But to kick us off, because I don't want to keep everyone too late here, we did have a couple people that, in the chat or in our Q&A really, express how passionate they are about biodiversity loss and their work with animals. So, Anna, do you have any advice for people looking for careers in this space, dedicated to protecting animals, or in roles like the one that you have now?
Yeah, my first advice would be to stay passionate. And as we heard from Jane, there are many different ways to get involved. I loved that Jane really emphasized that working in business, you can still share, promote, and be a part of the dialogue, the conservation dialogue. So it's not something where there's one track and you have to go get a PhD in this specific field. It's something that truly, it takes all types, it takes everyone to be a part of this. And so I would say stay passionate, and look for ways in which you can reinforce these kinds of issues and make positive impacts in your own work. And volunteering is the lifeblood by which so many of us in the nonprofit and conservation field live. And so please do join us as a volunteer, whether it's locally in your own communities or on a more global scale with organizations that have a broad global perspective. Please do join us as a volunteer, and that's always a great way to get involved.
Absolutely. I think you tied in the next question a little bit because people were really curious about how to get involved with Jane Goodall Institute. So do you have any more specifics you can share in those volunteer opportunities or additional ways to become involved?
Absolutely. Within the Tampa community specifically, which what I spoke about earlier, watch for more about base camp activities through our Roots and Shoots program. That's going to be a very tangible way that the community can get involved, and you can get involved in the community. From a broader perspective, to join our work on a more international scale, please reach out. We are on all the social media platforms. Please do start a dialogue with us. We are always looking for great talent to be a part of it, whether it's as a donor. As I said earlier, all of our work is funded through charitable contributions or through volunteer opportunities. So please do reach out.
Great. This question I think would be great for both of you to answer. And it's someone who's asked, aside from donations to those nonprofit organizations, how can businesses, either large or small, make a positive impact on the planet today?
Do you want me to start?
Go Ken.
Well, the first thing is whoever is setting the tone for that business needs to have the commitment. If the CEO, owner, managing partner isn't committed, then nothing's going to happen. You can't just go hire a chief sustainability officer and say, okay, we got the bases covered. And that's the whole foundation of the greenwashing thing and all that. I personally do not understand how a CEO or business owner can sleep at night not doing the right thing. Now, if you deny climate change, that's one thing, and that's absolutely idiotic. I'll just put it out there, but there's plenty of people that do that. But take the example of a CEO of a snack food company. Are you just oblivious? Are you just blind? Do you just absolutely not care that you're poisoning whole generations? So I think it's got to start at the top, and if it's not real.
And I would just add to that, I think there's a lot of space, and something that Jane talks a lot about in her work and in her writings is celebrating the successes and celebrating those who are making positive impacts, holding up those positive examples, because those positive examples can inspire more to join you, and it celebrates people who and companies who are doing the right thing. I'll give an example that's very front of mind for us, especially as there's a film out right now with this name. The JGI partnered with Mattel to make a Jane Goodall Barbie. And that Jane Goodall Barbie we were so proud of because it was part of their sustainability line, produced out of ocean-bound plastic. All the packaging is recycled materials, and it's part of their inspiration line of showing what you can be and holding up Jane as an example of that. So engaging with others, celebrating their efforts to make a difference, to change the way in which we engage in business, and to be good stewards of our planet.
Oh my gosh, I need to go find the Jane Goodall Barbie.
It's wonderful.
Are there future projects or campaigns that Jane Goodall Institute is most excited about right now? Anything that's really, really top of mind or exciting? Roots
and Shoots is always near and dear to our heart. So it's it's very touching and it's very apparent when you chat with Jane, our work and our large landscape conservation, our research, continuing the things that she started 60 years ago, and that deep commitment to the communities that we work with in Africa is core to our business, are in the conservation industry. But the roots and shoots is something that we are just so excited about, especially as we come into the Tampa community. And we are just so looking forward to being there. So stay tuned and watch this space.
Let me look through my questions here. This is an interesting one. How has Dr. Goodall's approach to animal research and conservation evolved over her career?
I think I love that question. I love that question. It has evolved. I once, one of my most interesting conversations that I had with Jane was talking about how the work of her institute, of her namesake institute, the Jane Goodall Institute, has really evolved as her own understanding as a scientist, as an activist, as a conservationist, has evolved and expanded, going from the study of chimpanzees and their behavioral, and then moving into a place of protections, and that it's not just protecting the species. An analogy that's often used is to protect the fish. You can't drain the pond. You have to protect the entire ecosystem. So recognizing that making sure that those chimpanzees can thrive and live out their lives means protecting the entire environment, and that's working with humans as a part of it too. So really these kind of expanding concentric circles. And then Jane often uses the analogy of the tapestry of life. And she'll describe the tapestry of life of all these interconnected threads. And as you remove one, you may not notice a difference, but as more and more threads are removed, the tapestry will eventually unravel. And so, you know, she sees that interconnectivity in our world and in our planet, and that has then caused us to have a more expansive view as an organization.
Wow, I love that visual. So true, and a little scary as well, or a lot scary. Well, I don't want to keep us too far over time. So my favorite way of ending our fireside chats is for our guests and Ken to kind of share, like if you were going to take like a big action or takeaway from this call today, what would be your call out? What would be that action that you would encourage everyone to take?
Do you want me to start, or Ken, do you want to start?
You start.
Oh, no. What is the big action? I would say the big action is, I'm going to again use the words because I think they're so wise from Jane, that every individual matters. We all have a role to play, and to join us, the Jane Goodall Institute, to join Jane in really inspiring hope through our actions, making sure that it is not too late, bringing together those positive ripple effects of change. So, you know, please do join us. And thank you again to Climate First Bank, because thank you for joining us and allowing us to share this message and Jane's words. So thank you.
And to riff off of your comments, Anna, I would say the one big thing is to vote with your pocketbook. Every single thing you buy, every single thing you do has an impact somewhere. So that would be it. Absolutely.
Well, Anna, I know I speak for the whole Climate First Bank team when we say thank you for spending time with us. Getting to spend that time with Jane was like the highlight still of my whole year, and getting to spend this time with you is right there along with it. So thank you so much for spending time with us today. We had a really engaged chat and audience today, and I think we've left a lot of people inspired. So any last thoughts? Or Anna, can you share maybe if Jane will be touring again soon and where people could get the opportunity to see her?
Oh my gosh, Lauren, thank you for that. I love that. Yes, so Jane will be back in the United States. She's coming back this fall, and there are several public engagements that she'll be having on both coasts, including in San Francisco, New York, really all over the place. Jane, you know, the wonderful thing about Jane and working with Jane is we chase after her. She is just the most extraordinary person, and she keeps us all going. So there will be several opportunities, and please do watch our social media for that.
Awesome. Well, great. Ken, any last thoughts from you, or we will say goodbye to everyone?
Just major thanks. Thanks, Anna, if you can convey to Dr. Goodall our thanks, and thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you, Ken. And thank you again, Anna.
Thank you all.
Hopefully see everyone again soon. Have a great Thursday.